Like the office they commemorate, presidential libraries are living institutions. Certainly it is my hope that the Reagan Library will become a dynamic intellectual forum where scholars interpret the past and policymakers debate the future.
Welcome to the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute's virtual event series. To fulfill President Reagan's mission of making the Reagan Library a dynamic intellectual forum, our Center for Public Affairs Programming offers lectures and forums presenting perspectives on important public policy issues of the day. Each year, we bring you 20 to 30 events from politicians, authors, members of the media, business and military leaders, and more. Since the March 2020 closure of many businesses across our great country, the Reagan Foundation is now bringing its events online to ensure that we are still delivering world-class content, even if you can't get to our hilltop to watch it in person. In this week's Center for Public Affairs virtual event, we bring you Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who served as White House press secretary for President Donald Trump from 2017 to 2019. She's only the third woman and the very first mom to ever hold the job of White House press secretary. Sarah Sanders previously worked in leadership roles for U.S. senators, governors, and presidential campaigns. In 2007 and 2008, she helped lead her father, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, to victory in the Iowa caucuses and 7 other states as his national political director. She even accompanied him to the Reagan Library for our May 7, 2007 and January 30, 2008 GOP presidential candidate debates. During a November 2019 interview about her political future and possibly running in the future to be Arkansas's governor, she said, "There are 2 types of people who run for office. People that are called and people that just want to be a senator or governor. I feel like I've been called." During today's conversation, Sarah Huckabee Sanders discusses her new memoir, Speaking for Myself, Faith, Freedom, and the Fight of Our Lives Inside the Trump White House, a book she summarizes as a story of her challenges of being a working mom at the highest level of American politics and her role in the historic fight raging between the Trump administration and its critics for the future of our country. We now invite you to enjoy our virtual program coming to you from our Air Force One Pavilion Leadership Academy Oval Office with Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Reagan Foundation and Institute Executive Director John Highbush.
Well, what a treat to have you with us today, Sarah. Sorry you're not here live and in color, but we'll take this for today, and you are so welcome to come out and visit us at the Reagan Library anytime that you can.
That would be wonderful. I would love to be there in person, but I'll have to settle for virtual for now, but I'll definitely take you up on your offer and would love to come out at some point as soon as I'm able.
Very great. Your first book, and maybe not your last book, I bet you this had to be exciting to write, was it?
It was. It was, in a way, very therapeutic, too, to get to go back and relive some really spectacular and special moments. Some I'd probably prefer to block out, but all in all, I learned a lot from even those difficult moments. And I really loved the process of writing the book. And I'm very proud of how it turned out. And I think that hopefully people will laugh a little, cry a little, and maybe even be a little inspired by reading my story.
Yeah, I was. So I have to say, almost from the start, Sarah, I thought she must keep a diary or a journal or something, because your command of details from the time you were a little girl all the way through the Trump presidency, you captured so much detail. So do you keep a journal of some sort?
I wish I kept a better journal. Thankfully, I am married to a very spectacular and patient person. And my time at the White House, he sort of kept a journal of what I did that day and some kind of special moments. And so me relaying back to him some of my day helped me keep track of some of the big parts I write about in the book. And that was really critical in, I think, making the book have the amount of detail and helping the reader feel a little bit more like they're there. And I owe all of that to my husband, Brian, who really helped me do that.
Well, speaking of Brian, one of my favorite stories towards the front end of the book was about your engagement moment. I had to laugh because I'll tie it to my own personal story. I asked my wife to get engaged, and a bit different from yours. I had the engagement ring around the puppy's neck who ran in for her to find it. Now you have a story like that involving your pregnancies. I thought maybe you could just pass that on because it's such a great story.
Sure. So we had found out that we were expecting our first child, our daughter Scarlett, and I was actually a little further along than we even thought, but I tied a note around our dog's neck thinking that he could run into my husband's office and interrupt him while he was working. And it would be this really fun moment. And I sent the dog, try to get him to go in. And he was jumping on my husband, who was very focused on his work and not paying attention to the dog. And I asked him, can you take Winston, our dog, out? And he was like, can you please do it? And I'm just like, come on, this is going how it's supposed to. But maybe that's practice, because parenting doesn't always go exactly how it's supposed to. And it was good preparation. But he eventually saw the note and couldn't have been more excited. And we were blessed enough after that to have 2 more kids. And so now we're the proud parents of Scarlett, Huck, and George.
Oh, terrific. Yeah, I loved the moment. It was so genuine. Now, another story, I had to smile when I read it. Apparently, this was, let's accelerate way into now we're into the Trump presidency, but only a day old. And you tell a story in the book about a phone call that you took at the White House on I guess your second day at work. Can you tell us about that? Because it says something about President Trump, which I really think is neat.
I had just gotten to the office. It was pretty early in the morning, and I was the only person in the press office at the time. And the main line to the office kept ringing. So I went out and not even thinking, I didn't even think to say White House press office. I just said hello. And the caller asked to speak to Sean Spicer, who was the press secretary at the time and my boss. And I let him know Sean wasn't in, but I'd be happy to pass something on. And this familiar voice goes, "Sarah, is that you?" And I quickly realized that it wasn't just any caller, but it was the President of the United States who was on the other line and wanted to talk to Sean that morning. And I let him know he would be in a few minutes. And he quickly started up a conversation, and we chatted for a few minutes. And he told me about a tweet that he had thought about putting out, and it hadn't gone out as planned. And I told him that maybe that was a good thing. Maybe we should do that more often. And we kind of joked about that. And I think that was probably one of those moments where I don't know why he forgave me for it, but he did. And we had a great relationship during my time at the White House and still today.
Well, I have a sneaking suspicion I know why he forgave you. And it's a theory I have about President Trump, and you can confirm or deny this. But Sarah, it seems like what he really respects in an individual, someone that might work for him, is competence and confidence. And the fact that you were able to just joke with him right off the bat like that, it told me that he really did, from the first moments in the White House, have a lot of confidence in your abilities.
The president loves to surround himself not with people who are going to echo everything that he already thinks. He doesn't mind hearing a diverse viewpoint. And in fact, he likes to bring in opposing sides and let them kind of make their case. And then he'll make a decision based off of that information. I think that's one of the reasons that he's such a good executive. He has the ability to take in so much information from a number of different stakeholders, process that, and then make a decision and move forward. And it's one of the things I think that has helped him be very successful in DC in his first 4 years. And, it's been pretty fun to have a front row seat to history and be able to watch him and sort of shake up the way that Washington has always operated.
Sure. Well, the front row seat that you had, Sarah, almost universal agreement, I think, in Washington, D.C., that it's one of the toughest jobs there can possibly be for a political appointee. And in that front row seat, it seemed to me you really wanted to make a point in your book about how faith plays a truly important part of your life, because it seems to me it's something that's really helped you get through some high stress times. Is that right?
Absolutely. I think that for so many people, they can get lost in Washington. For me, I wasn't going to Washington looking and hoping for the New York Times or the Washington Post to define me. I had a creator who had already done that. And I was blessed to know who I was and what I believed in before I went there. And my faith is what got me through some of the hardest and most challenging days. Without that, I'm not sure I could have made it through some of those difficult moments. And I'm beyond grateful that I have that, and hope that people in reading my book get to see that come through. And maybe that gives them some encouragement as well, and, can strengthen their relationship and their faith in addition to that.
Yeah, it was really inspiring, Sarah. Thanks. I mean, a great job of that on the book. Mike Pompeo, he's just one of many of the president's appointees that you showed through your writing that you admired him a great deal. I do too. Everyone here is so respectful of his talents. I wonder, there were also some other names of people that you worked alongside who were just as talented in their own rights, but many names oftentimes that we might not hear of, or read about in the press. Are there any that you'd particularly call attention to where you'd say, the nation's in better shape as a result of their work?
I think there are a lot of people, and I really tried hard to highlight a lot of these individuals. There were so many people who sacrificed so much to be in the White House and to have that opportunity to serve. Certainly, it's a privilege to get to do it. At the same time, particularly in this administration, there are a lot of challenges and difficulties that come with it. Many of us who went into the administration, I don't think ever really anticipated becoming household names and regulars on Saturday Night Live. And so there were some new challenges that no one expected. But there were so many people that are just incredibly dedicated to the country and to making every single American's life a little bit better. A couple of the people in the President's Inner Circle that I talk about in the book, Dan Scavino and Hope Hicks, both very close to the president and just tremendous professionals. The president's family. I think so many times people don't appreciate the sacrifice that they've made or the contributions that they have made. Ivanka has been a huge leader, not just in the United States, but on a global scale for helping women entrepreneurs all over the world to have opportunity, to have resources, to have funding. She's done a spectacular job on workforce development. Jared Kushner and his role both in USMCA and trade deal, as well as the breakthroughs and the advancement we've had in the Middle East peace process. The president's sons, Don Jr. and Eric, who are such public and outspoken defenders of their dad. I think so often he needs extra people out there fighting for him because he receives so much negative attention that it's good to know that his family's there fighting by his side. His daughter Tiffany did a spectacular job at the convention not too long ago, and I think taking on a bit more of a role. One person that I would be remiss if I didn't mention too is the First Lady. I think she is remarkable in every way. And I've said it before, and I'm going to continue to say it. If she was married to a Democrat, she would be one of the most celebrated First Ladies in our country's history. But because she's married to Donald Trump, instead of celebrating her, they constantly attack her for everything. I think she has done just a really beautiful job, and I think brings so much spirit to the White House and to the role as First Lady that I'm just really proud of the work that she's done and the person that she is.
Yeah, neat. Well, I had a brief chance to spend a little bit of time with her at an event at the White House, and you're absolutely right. What a gracious First Lady she is, really. You have another story in your book. I'd never heard this or seen it in the press. It just knocked me over when I read it. It was about your experience with Kim Jong Il and a particular look that he gave you. Can you share that with us?
Sure. We were at the historic summit, the first meeting between the North Korean leader and President Trump in Singapore. And I was fortunate enough to be one of a handful of people. I believe there were 7 of us at the table for lunch that day for that bilateral meeting. I'd been taking notes throughout the meeting, and I looked up at one point to make eye contact with Kim Jong Un, where he appeared to kind of nod and wink at me. I think I misinterpreted the wink a little bit, and the president and General Kelly were quick to point that out, and we had a lot of laughs about it. And it's, I think, a pretty interesting story with a lot of detail that I hope people will read. But I think the big takeaway from that event and from that day was the progress that we made under the leadership of this president. And, I think we're obviously a long way from seeing Kim relinquish all of his nuclear weapons. I don't think that's lost on anybody what an uphill battle that is. However, the president has made that at least something we're talking about. And I think some of the big things that happened in those negotiations were the hostages coming back from North Korea to the United States, the remains of U.S. soldiers coming back to the United States. From there, they halted a lot of their testing during that time period. So some progress was made, and I think there were certainly some big benefits to come from those conversations. And I'm hopeful that the president can continue, and we'll see what happens once he gets reelected in November over the next 4 years.
I'll say 2 words, and this will evoke instant memory with you. Red hen. It seemed to me when I read the chapter on this incident, Sarah, that you really felt, okay, this is my chance. I'm going to explain my side of the story and what happened. Can you just give us a couple of minutes on that whole experience?
Sure. I really hadn't talked much publicly about the incident at the Red Hen, where the restaurant owner asked my family and I to leave the restaurant when we were dining there in Lexington, Virginia. And I was frankly pretty much in shock when she first approached our table and asked me to leave. And I did so quietly. I didn't want to create a scene. I just grabbed my things and exited. What most people don't know, and the next part of that story, is that after I left, my husband and I went back to the house that we were staying for the weekend. And the rest of my husband's family went to another restaurant across the street. And the restaurant owner gathered her friends and actually went and held signs and protested them at another restaurant after they had already left her establishment. And I wasn't even there. Finally, one of my husband's family members went over and let them know I wasn't there. And it was probably best for them to pack it up and go home. And eventually they left. But the level of harassment and hostility towards people you don't agree with is, I think, pretty mind-blowing. And shortly after that incident, we saw a member of Congress actually encourage people to continue harassing members of the Trump administration, to get in their face. When it came to the liberal mob, nothing was off limits. They were happy to attack us personally, our appearance, my fitness to be a mother, and even ask us to leave their restaurants. And so it's really a difficult thing to wrap your head around. But at the same time, I felt it was important for me to tell my side of the story and to get that out so people knew just in some ways how far they had gone.
Yeah, so much for civility in politics, right? Now, on the flip side, one of my favorite stories, and I'm sure, well, I read in your book that there was some press on it. I'm sorry I missed the story, but the story that you told about this 10-year-old boy and a letter he sent to the president and how you followed up and what you did. Can you relate that for us?
Absolutely. So I think you're talking about my friend Frank. And, you know, one of the things that we wanted to do in the briefing, because so often it was a battle between the White House and the press. And I thought that talking and addressing some questions and some of the mail that the president got from Americans from around the country might be a little bit of a way to bring the temperature down, but also remind people what we're doing there and who we all are trying to help, and that's the American people. So I started reading letters occasionally from the podium in the briefing room, and one particular letter that the president got was from a little boy named Frank, and he had a lawn mowing business and offered to come and mow the White House lawn. So we asked him to do just that. And we brought Frank to the White House, and he actually mowed the area just outside of the Oval Office where the president came, stopped by and talked to Frank, high-fived him. And Frank did a great job from what I heard. Not too long after that, we had Frank back to the White House for another event. And he and his dad told us that his lawn mowing business had skyrocketed and things were doing really well. And he got some great shots of him and the president. And at the end of the day, he said it was probably the best day of his life. So to get to make a 10-year-old's day, that's a pretty good moment, I think, for anybody.
Sure was. Thanks for writing about it, Sarah. What a wonderful story, really. A few questions about the president and your work alongside with him. I might run the Reagan Foundation and worked in Washington for many years in various jobs, but I have to tell you, I'm probably losing my political instincts. I say that because I was one of the majority of Americans that didn't think he was going to win in November 2016. It was a surprise to me. I wondered if, you worked very hard on the campaign. It probably wasn't a surprise to you, was it?
No, I got to see, particularly traveling around the country, the enthusiasm and the level of support for this president. And so many people missed it because they didn't want to pay attention to your everyday Americans that in some cases either had never voted before or had never voted for a Republican before. But there were so many people who felt like the traditional politicians had forgotten them, the forgotten men and women of America. And they were the people who had been hit hardest from illegal immigration, bad trade deals, and bad economic policy. And they wanted somebody who they felt was speaking for them and fighting for them. And they found that in Donald Trump. And they just loved him. And the level of enthusiasm, even now, is something I've never witnessed before, despite all of the many campaigns I've worked on and all of the different candidates I've seen. No one has the level of support from his people as Donald Trump does. If you go to a Trump rally or any other presidential event, there's just something that's very different. The amount of energy and excitement for Donald Trump is unlike any I've seen before.
Your very first chapter, Sarah, you entitled it appropriately so, Kill 'Em All. And it was a great read. And as I read it, I thought about this present story about, what's some anonymous sources have said President Trump said about the military. It's impossible to read that first chapter of yours and believe for a moment that this recent story is true. That's how I felt.
Exactly. And I was there in the moment that they've talked about in the Atlantic story. And there were only a couple of us that were part of that conversation. And I think most of them have now spoken out and said that this didn't happen. It isn't true. Yet all of these on-record accounts seem to hold, I guess, less with the media than a couple of anonymous sources. I find it just truly appalling and frankly pretty disgusting that a story like this can come out and be peddled by the media with no name attached to it. To me, it's very cowardly and it's very opposite of everything I've seen from this president. After spending 2.5 years with him, traveling to dozens and dozens of countries with the president, it's unlike anything I've witnessed firsthand. This is a president who loves our country and loves and respects the great men and women of our military. And I've seen that in so many moments that despite the fact I know I was there, I know it didn't happen, but even if I hadn't been there, I wouldn't I would know that that is not who this president is and who his heart is, particularly given the men and women of our military.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Sarah. It could take you 2 hours to answer this question, but maybe you can compress it into just a minute. But could you define for us the Trump you know in person and what he's like as a man, as a president, versus the Trump the average person might get to know because of how he's portrayed in the media?
The Donald Trump that I know is a president who loves this country and who wakes up every day fighting to make it better. This isn't a person who needed to be president. He was already famous. He was already very successful in business. He was already wealthy. He didn't need to be president, but he put all of that on the line. Frankly, he sacrificed a lot of those things so that he could serve and take on an enormous amount of heat and take on all of the negative attacks. And yet he's still standing. He's still fighting. He's still going out there every single day fighting for this country and fighting to protect the America that we love. And I tried to show the president's heart. He's not somebody who likes to show that side of himself even very often, but he's very generous and he can be extremely kind, even to people he doesn't know. And I wanted people to see that side. And that's why I really tried to highlight some of those moments in my book. And I hope that people come away understanding a little bit more about the president and hopefully loving and supporting him in the way that I do.
Then you threw something in to one of the chapters, and I went, wow. And again, if you don't work closely for him, you might never know this, but you mentioned that just about everywhere he goes, there's a dozen or more boxes, file folder-sized boxes full of materials that he's in the midst of reading. Tell us about that.
The president is a very huge reader. Every single time, particularly when we're on longer trips, he takes major file folder boxes of briefing papers, of magazines, of newspapers, and he goes through everything. And it's not uncommon to get a newspaper article or a briefing paper with something circled in Sharpie marker and a note written, Sarah, take care of this, or Sarah, get this to so-and-so, tell this person thank you, tell this person we've got to work on this, or bad policy, let's fix. And so he is very engaged and very thorough and just consumes a significant amount of information, more than probably just about anybody I've seen.
Yeah, amazing. Because you'd never believe or know that if you hadn't read your book. He admired your abilities. That's obvious. And I wonder, I've been in various political jobs where once you've worked for someone, even though you might go off to do something else, you still kind of work for them. I wondered, did you set a hard and fast rule with the president? Say, okay, I'm gone now. You don't need to call me at 2 a.m. Or is he still relying on your advice on things?
I don't get a lot of those 2 a.m. phone calls anymore, thankfully. But anytime the president would want or feel the need to call, I would be more than happy to be on the other end of that line. I've continued to talk with him after leaving the administration. And again, anytime he wants to visit, it doesn't have to be for anything he even needs. If he just wants to visit, I'm happy to be on the other end of that line.
I obviously, I still work for the Reagans. And Ronald Reagan, as you know, having grown up in much of the time frame of the Reagan years, he made an indelible mark on this nation. He's remembered for so many things. I bet that you believe that same will hold true for President Trump. Is that right?
Absolutely. I think that he has forever changed the presidency. I think he has made it clear that you don't have to rely on the media, take your message directly to the American people. I think that's something President Reagan did. He didn't have all the great social media tools to help him do that quite as easily, but he was a great communicator. And I think that you're seeing some of those same things from this president. is he doesn't have to have the media communicate his message. He does that. I think it's one of the reasons they often don't like him, because he doesn't need them and he goes around them. But I think the president will have a major lasting legacy. And one of the places that I think that's often ignored that will have a generational impact left behind from President Trump is the remaking of the judiciary. The president has appointed over 200 different federal judges at this point. And I think that that has such a major impact for those individuals to be in those positions, and may at some point, hopefully it doesn't get to this place, but they will be one of the last lines of defense for some of the crazy radical left ideas that we see coming out of Washington.
Maybe if we could talk about the upcoming election for a few minutes. I'd love to pick your brain on this, Sarah. I used to have, one of my roles was on the Senate side. And, of course, while I worked for Republicans, I got to meet on a few occasions, spend a little time with Senator Biden. So I watch him now, admittedly from afar, and I can't help but think he has definitely lost a step. And I don't know if you want to go into whether his cognition is all still there, but it really does seem like there's a real issue that the media is avoiding talking about and looking into. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And this question was asked of President Trump dozens of times. I know, because I fielded those questions. And the fact that they let Biden off with the free pass on this seems to be a little bit of malpractice from their end. Certainly, you have to be able to handle the complexities of the job of being president. And I haven't seen Joe Biden demonstrate over the last several months that he has that ability. He doesn't take difficult questions from the media. He barely does events. When he does, they're often scattered and incoherent. So I do think that the media needs to hold his feet to the fire much harder than they have over these last couple of months, and make sure that he is ready and able and capable to do the job. And up until this point, I haven't seen much that demonstrates that he can. And I think that's why they avoid asking, because they dislike this president so much that they're willing to give Joe Biden a free pass.
Well, there's on the calendar 2-3 occasions in the near future where this topic is going to be front of mind no matter what, because of the debates, right? It's going to be very difficult to control that environment and, through the questions. If you were working for Biden, I can't imagine it, but would you advise him avoid the debates? Because these could be game changers, right?
Look, thankfully, I don't have to ever face that question, because I won't ever be working for Joe Biden. But I do think it's important for people to see, again, whether or not he's capable of holding the office. If he can't stand on stage and take questions for 90 minutes, how is he going to sit across the table from President Xi or Putin or Kim Jong Un and stay strong for our country and negotiate trade deals and, advocate on behalf of the American people? If you can't do that against a political rival, you certainly can't do that against some of the world's most difficult and tough other world leaders and our adversaries. So I think he absolutely has to stand on that debate stage. And if he doesn't, or he can't, I think that is a huge indicator for every voter in America that he's just not up to the challenge.
Yeah, as you know, Sarah, in these major presidential debates, oftentimes, and folklore is, well, they might involve a lot of flash and light. They often don't make a major difference in an election. A lot of people's minds are changed by then. But this one seems to be lining up quite differently, right? This one is, these debates are going to be all about whether or not he's got that capability.
Absolutely. And don't let it be lost. Joe Biden has had moments where he's risen to the challenge. He delivered at least a coherent convention speech. I won't say it was spectacular, but it was good. I don't think you can take that away from him. However, I think the bar was set pretty low. But he may step onto that stage. The real question after that is not just can he handle the stage with the president, but what does he talk about while he's there? Does he also spend all of his time only attacking the president, or does he actually tell us the policies that he would implement if he became president? And I think if he's very honest, he has moved so far to the left. And if he talks about those policies and where his party is, I think it will be very difficult for Joe Biden to win in November, because the ideas of the radical left just do not match up with the majority of America.
Well, as you well know, politics is in many respects always about perception and expectations. I presume the main thing that Vice President Biden has going for him is that the expectations bar is so low that if he just shows up, it might well be that the media says he won just for showing up.
I think you're right. And I think, that's must be nice to be Joe Biden. He gets a free pass on his campaign events or lack thereof. And then, again, I think if he just manages to stand up there and put some sentences together, they'll call it a win. But I think that's why it's so important for people to really pay attention to what he says. It can't just be that performance. While I think that is incredibly important because he needs to be able to demonstrate he can handle the job, we also need to know what he would do with the job if he got it. And to me, the agenda of the Democrat Party is totally disqualifying at this point.
Yeah. Can you talk for a minute about the polls that we're seeing? I know as of late it feels like they're tightening, especially in a lot of these battleground states. Do you think, generally speaking, the polls in 2020 are probably a lot like those in 2016, where this race is a lot tighter than people think it is, or the media thinks it is?
Certainly, I think there is a huge silent majority that still supports this president. I also, going back to what we talked about earlier, the level of energy and enthusiasm for Donald Trump versus the energy for Joe Biden is drastic. There is no energy for Joe Biden. Most of the people that you hear that are voting for Joe Biden are actually, they just don't like the president. It's not that they even like Joe Biden. And I think that's not the best motivator in the world for people to go out and actually vote on election day. And he's going to have to figure something out, because I don't think what he's doing right now is going to work. One of the reasons we've seen him finally emerge from his basement this past week is I think he sees the writing on the wall. He sees the polls tightening. He sees himself falling back. President Trump has the momentum. I think that momentum going into the debate is going to be very good for this president.
Sarah, do you think, in all probability, it's likely the race will be close again. Are we lining ourselves up for potentially a real serious travesty, an issue where, because it's close and all the commotion that is accompanied this race, that one side or the other will simply not accept the results? Throw in now that you got 80, 100 million mail-in ballots. This could be ugly, could it not?
It could, but I hope not. And I obviously am biased, but I hope for a very decisive and clear victory for President Trump on November 3rd, and that this doesn't drag out, and that we don't see this go on for weeks and months, that it is a clear, decisive victory for the president.
Can I talk to you? I would just have a few questions for you about the job as of press secretary to the president. Your political career, you were a campaign consultant, you've been a campaign manager, you have just about every job there is in politics. But then, almost by fortitude and happenstance, you were asked to go on camera to do an interview, and that turned into another interview, and that turned into a career. If you were offered any job at the White House, it seems to me, given your expertise, that you'd probably be the director of political affairs or something like that. But you took the press role, and I wonder, would you have been just as interested in being on the campaign or the policy side or the public affairs side? But you did a marvelous role as press secretary. I just wonder if that was kind of a unique turn in your career.
It certainly was different and not probably what I would have ever set out to do, but I absolutely loved my experience and the opportunity that the president gave me to stand at that podium and be his voice and help him deliver the message to the country. And certainly, I think the political component of my life, initially would have lined up more with another position, but President Trump saw something different in me and felt like that was the right place for me to be. And I'm glad he did, because I absolutely loved that job. I loved my experience, and it gave me the chance, I think, to really develop a strong relationship with the president, but also expand even who I was myself, learn more about myself, test my faith, strengthen my faith, and certainly made me a lot tougher. Some of that I probably could have done without, but it was really a remarkable experience. And I'm beyond grateful that he gave me the opportunity to serve in his administration in any role, but particularly that he trusted me and had confidence in me to take that on.
There was an event or series of events when you were press secretary that, and I know you commented on it at the time. I wonder what you think about it now that you're no longer in the role. But from afar, when I saw this issue of with the White House Correspondents Association and the dust-up that occurred when it involved essentially who had credentials to sit there in the White House press room, I have to tell you, I was just amazed that the president and the White House, the administration, didn't have the kind of latitude that I thought, at least I personally thought it should have, with respect to not necessarily what news organization is allowed to cover the presidency in the White House, but the fact that the White House has seems to me, no control whatsoever as to, who's allowed within a media organization to have those credentials. Can you just give us kind of the insight on that? Because I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, the White House Correspondents Association actually determines what outlets have seats and where those seats are in the briefing room. And if you don't have a seat, you're certainly welcome to attend if you're a credentialed member of the press, but you have to stand along the sides and along the back of the room, which these days is quite unfair, because in the age of the coronavirus, those individuals that don't have seats aren't allowed to participate at all. And, I think that we tried to push back on a number of instances. We helped get some additional outlets added into the rotation for having a seat. But I think that's a way of kind of the media elites controlling the message and making sure that the people that they want are in the room. And I'd love to see that mixed up a little bit. The president, if anybody can do it, I have faith that Donald Trump can maybe mix that up a little and make something happen with some new people in the front row.
Yeah. Can we talk about CNN for a minute? Sarah, you're old enough to have watched CNN over the years, and in my opinion, it was once upon a time was a credible news gathering organization that did a good job, and you could tune into them for news. What has happened?
I think CNN has decided that they are the anti-Trump network. They have decided that their base is the group of people that are going to dislike the president no matter how good of a job he does. And they simply cater to that crowd. I think that's also the reason that their ratings aren't as high as some of the other networks, because there just aren't that many people who want to see the president fail. At the end of the day, most people want the president, I think, to succeed because they want our country to succeed. And CNN has decided that they hate the president more than they love America. And they have one job and one job only, and that's to tear him down. And I think it is very sad because, like you said, I do think that at one time they were a credible news outlet, but I just don't see a lot of that from them anymore.
Yeah. I'm not asking you to get personal here at all, but of course, with the dust-up with CNN so many times, the personality that was right out front for them was Jim Acosta. And his star seems to have faded somewhat in the last year. Do you have a view on why that is, or do I have this wrong?
No, I think because he doesn't have that platform to get into those exchanges in the briefing room every day. And without that, nobody's paying attention to him because they're not watching him on CNN. And so without those moments where he's attacking and going after whoever is at that podium, then I think he's just become pretty irrelevant. And he just doesn't have a platform and a place to go in order to attack the president and the people that work for him.
You make the factual statement you were the very first mom to have the role of press secretary to the president, and you handled it marvelously, Sarah. What advice would you have, maybe not just for future female press secretaries to the president, but to women generally speaking that are in these really difficult, high stress, high level jobs and trying to balance that with being a mom and having kids at home?
I think so often women can be our own worst enemies. We put so much pressure on one another to be perfect. And instead of being perfect, I think we should focus a little bit more on being present. We can't be there all the time, particularly if we have a very high stress, demanding job. It's going to take us away from some of that family time. However, in the time that we do have, if we can put our phones aside, close our computers, and really be present in the moment, that small amount of time of quality time, I think, is so much more important than having a large amount of time. Certainly, if you can spend more time with your kids, absolutely you should. But when you can't and you have a high stress, demanding job, really try to make sure when you have those moments, you're very intentional, very focused on making sure that they know that they're a priority. I also tried to include my kids into what I was doing. I wanted them to know why it was important for our family to be involved, that we are strong believers and that we are principled people and we have to stand up for what we believe in and we have to be willing to fight for that sometimes. We wanted them to see that. We wanted them to know why we serve. We wanted them to know why we were willing to make that sacrifice. And I hope that even though they were young, that they picked up on some of that. And again, it'll be a lesson that we continue to try to push every day with our kids.
Yeah, well said. Okay, so I presume that you've picked this interview for your book to be the moment that you're going to announce your run for the governor of Arkansas. Is that right?
Not quite, but if it comes,
maybe not.
If it comes time for that, maybe I'll come back and we'll wait to do that one in person. How about that? I'm very serious about it, but right now my focus is on 2020. It's on getting my book into as many people's hands as possible over the next couple of months. I'm biased, but I think it's a great read. And I want to see the president get reelected. I want to see us maintain the Senate. And I want to see us take control of the House and never have to call Nancy Pelosi Madam Speaker again. So that's my focus right now. And after 2020, I'll make a final decision and an announcement about what I'm going to do next.
Great. Just a couple more questions. Now, you know that if you do make a run for governor someday, one of the biggest sins that a candidate can make is trying to be the campaign manager at the same time they are the candidate. So you're going to have a particularly tough time, are you not, as a candidate wanting to actually run the campaign?
I do think that would be certainly a big challenge. I'm very used to being the consultant and the campaign manager. So to take that away and only be a candidate and not get to be in the middle of all of those moments would probably be pretty difficult. But I love that part of it. One of the things I love about the campaign is any campaign is that you get to interact with so many different people, whether you're running for mayor or governor or president. One of the beauties of this country and the democracy that we live in is that you get to interact with people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds. And it really, I think, gives you such a great picture of who we are as a country and a community. And that's one of the things I love about it. And whether you're the campaign manager or a candidate, you still get to experience that.
You know, we talked a little bit about the importance of faith in your life. And I wonder, I really got the impression as I read your book throughout, Sarah, that you were called to politics. Isn't that right? I mean, it just feels to me like you take it as a calling for you in your personal life.
Absolutely. And, I want to follow the path that God sets for me. And I felt like he called me to Washington and called our family to move to Washington and to be part of the president's administration. And I've learned the hard way that when you don't listen to what God wants you to do, it doesn't always work out very well. So he usually has a funny way of shifting you back to where you're supposed to be in the first place. But I think that there are just a couple of types of people who are involved in politics. People who want to be somebody and think that by being in politics they can, or people that already believe in somebody. And for me, I believe in somebody that's higher than myself and bigger than myself. And anything I would do, I hope that I do in a way that glorifies God and that honors him and the path that he's chosen for me.
Yeah, great, well said. Last question, Sarah. And this is a tough one, a weird one for you. Maybe, I don't know if you've ever gotten before. Congress passed a law tomorrow, said, sorry, Sarah, you can't be in politics. That's not going to be your career. Not at all. You have to do something else. What do you think that something else might be?
Oh, wow, that is a tough one. This one's totally out of left field, but you've taken my other opportunities off the table. One thing I absolutely love to do is to travel. And so if I could find a job that allowed me to travel, maybe I could be a travel photographer or a critic of some kind. I think that could be really fun and a great way to explore the world and see a lot of different things. So that would, I guess, be my totally off the wall fun pick, as something that allowed me to travel and see the world.
Well, maybe maybe you could start your own Rick Steves type show and teach us all how to travel. That's neat, Sarah. Listen, we cannot thank you enough for being with us in this past hour, but writing such a terrific book. And I loved every page of this book, Sarah. Thank you so much for writing, and congratulations for a great first book.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate that you read the book and how thoughtful your questions were, and just you allowing me to be part of this and the tremendous operation that you guys have there at the Reagan Library. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Look forward to seeing you out here when you can make it, Sarah. So take care of yourself.
You bet. Thanks, Sean.
We hope this conversation has inspired you to share what you've learned with your family and friends, and that you'll join us again for an upcoming event.
And let me offer lesson number one about America. All great change in America begins at the dinner table. So tomorrow night in the kitchen, I hope the talking begins. And children, if your parents haven't been teaching you what it means to be an American, let them know and nail them on it. That would be a very American thing to do.